Welcome to Terra Gazette. Thanks for checking out our channel. Please consider subscribing. We're going to do our best to present you with as many facts as possible so you can fully understand the situation and form your own opinions. Today we'll be going over the recent coup in Niger. A month has passed now, and with diplomacy having failed, ECOWAS and its Western allies seem set on an invasion of the West African nation. A population of over 27 million, over 10 million of which the World Bank reports live in extreme poverty. On the 26th of July, the head of Niger's presidential guard, Abdurrahman Chiani, led other members of the guard and members of the military to take control of the country by force. On this day, July 26, 2023, we, the Defense and Security Forces, have decided to put an end to the regime you know. ECOWAS is a regional bloc consisting of 15 West African nations, essentially acting as a political and economic union with a shared interest on trade and security in the region. They'd given the coup government until August 6th to reinstate the deposed President Bazoum or face military intervention. We are here for the departure of the French base, because we know that the French base here, they are the terrorists themselves, who are killing us, who are looting us today. 63 years of aid. That's enough. We do not want their aid. Down with France. We have nothing against the French people. Our issue is with French politics. French politics and their President Macron. Down with ECOWAS. Down with ECOWAS. We are not afraid. Unsurprisingly, the military government refused these demands, instead rallying thousands of Nigerians to meet right at the moment of the deadline's passing to show their support for the new government. Tens of thousands of citizens rallied at the stadium to witness the passing of the deadline, making it known they would defend the new government if necessary. Neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso committed to sending military support in case of the nation suffering an attack. The Central African nation, Chad, although not being a part of ECOWAS, stated they would not be involved in any military actions. Chad shares a 1,200-kilometer border with Niger, on its east, running from Libya in the north to Nigeria in the south.
Huge crowds could be seen marching towards a French military base in Niger's capital, Niamey. These are supporters of the recent military takeover, and their anger is targeted at former colonial power France and the West African regional bloc, ECOWAS.
Because of this situation that France wants to impose on us, we don't agree with France. We want French soldiers to leave our country and go to their country. This is Niger, not France. This is Niger, not France.
Yes, we are here for an equal partnership. We are here for a fixed partnership. We are here for 50-50 partnership. We are not here for a dark partnership in the shadows, which is what France has done for years, decades, centuries, controlling us. In Africa, we've studied, we know everything. We are now intellectuals, and we are here to get France out of the way.
France has indicated it will support the activation of a standby force by ECOWAS.
On August 4th, the Nigerian representative announced the revoking of 5 military deals with France that were initially signed between 1977 and 2020. French state-funded news outlets such as France 24 and RFI were suspended, and the French authorities declined to comply with orders to leave the country, citing that the military deals were signed with the legitimate government. On the 6th of August, the military government closed the country's airspace as a deadline set by ECOWAS to reinstate the deposed government neared.
Faced with France's flippant attitude and reaction to the internal situation in our country, the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland has decided to denounce the cooperation agreements in the field of security and defense with France.
On August 7th, U.S. Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland held talks with the new government, pressuring for the restoration of the deposed Bazoum. On the 10th of August, a list of 21 people who were to become the new ministers was made public.
Biden has called for the release of Bazoum, who's being held under house arrest. Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland traveled to Niger to foment diplomacy, but per reports, coup leaders are not interested in hearing much from her and are not backing down. They refused to let her even meet with Bazoum.
On Sunday, Niger's military junta ignored a demand by ECOWAS to reinstate the president. ECOWAS has imposed sanctions on the military in Niger and has called a summit, an emergency summit, for this Thursday. Well, there are U.S. and European interests at risk in this crisis. More than 1,000 U.S. soldiers are stationed in the country. Washington has spent $500 million training Nigerian armed forces in counterterrorism against Islamist extremism. Niger is also a major transit route for migrants heading for Europe. Will this latest coup change any of this? For now, the military junta is in control, and it is warning the outside world not to interfere.
Now we'll take a look at the various parties involved, starting with the United States. Niger serves as a main hub for combating extremism in the region and hosts the US's largest and most expensive drone base to date, commonly referred to as Base 201. The $110 million installation features a 6,200-foot runway to enable the operation of MQ-9 Reapers. The US began conducting flights from the base in November of 2019. Recently, when the new government in Niger failed to meet ECOWAS's aforementioned August 6 deadline, they subsequently closed the Nigerian airspace, grounding even the drones stationed in Agadez. The US states that recent events greatly hinder their ability to fight extremism in the region, noting that this particular drone base was a key component in their strategies and ability to perform strikes in West and North Africa. Now we'll take a look at France and its interests in the region. France has maintained its presence in the region ostensibly for counter-terrorism purposes, but many doubt these claims. There have been 9 coups in Africa since 2020. Twice in Burkina Faso, twice in Mali, once in Guinea, once in Chad, another in Sudan, the one we are covering currently in Niger, and most recently last week's coup in Gabon. All those nations, albeit for Sudan, are ex-colonies of France. Every single one of those exists within the franc zone, wherein their former colonial ruler prints their currencies under certain contracts dating back to 1945. Here we have an article from France 24, a state-aligned outlet in France. In 2021, Niger produced 4.7% of the world's total uranium, behind Kazakhstan's 45%, while in 2022, Niger was the second largest supplier of uranium to the European Union, with a share of 25%. Kazakhstan, Niger, and Canada were the top 3 countries delivering uranium, providing 74% of the total. France operates 56 reactors that provide more than 2/3 of the nation's electricity. Niger was the number 3 source during the 2005 to 2020 period. Coupled with the rush for African resources, France still maintains a sort of financial hold on its ex-colonies, printing currencies in the form of CFA francs for some 14 nations, a holdover from the colonial era. The CFA franc was created in 1945 when the French government ratified the Bretton Woods Agreement. In it imposed certain restrictions on national banks, such as maintaining at least 50% of foreign assets with the French treasury. And in 1994, when France devalued the CFA franc, member states had to impose wage freezes and layoffs in the wake of the CFA devaluation, leading to widespread unrest over inaccessible goods for consumers and unmanageable price controls for suppliers. Now we'll take a look at some of Niger's neighbors in West Africa, starting with ECOWAS, the West African bloc, some have accused of serving as a tool of Western nations, while defenders claim that the bloc is primarily used to combat rising terrorism in the region in the form of such groups as Al-Qaeda or Boko Haram. In fact, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu was unanimously elected as chairman of ECOWAS in July. Nigeria has the continent's largest military. It is the most populous nation with 223 million people and by far the largest economy. He is now leading the charge for an intervention in Niger.
The Economic Community of West African States bloc was formed in 1975 and comprises 15 African countries, including Niger and Nigeria. It was set up to foster trade, but it has also addressed political and military unrest in the past, with some success. It sent peacekeeping missions and ECOWAS-backed forces into the Gambia, Ivory Coast, and Guinea-Bissau. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, who is also currently the ECOWAS chairman, appeared to be pushing for military intervention, but analysts say that's unlikely. Nigeria would have to provide the bulk of the military resources.
Nigeria's Senate immediately rejected President Tinubu's calls for military action, asking instead that he explore other options than the use of force in Niger, citing, as per the Constitution, the deployment of armed forces for combat duty outside the borders must be approved by the Senate unless the president deems national security under imminent threat or danger. Instead, President Tinubu moved to rally allies within ECOWAS and activate a standby force. Thousands rallied in Nigeria to oppose these efforts, with protesters demanding the government not send any troops to invade their neighbor. 10 members of the total 15 in ECOWAS have committed forces to the standby force. The remaining 5, with Niger being one of them, are Guinea and Cabo Verde, who have both declined to commit forces, and Burkina Faso and Mali, who have not only declined to commit forces, but went even further to say an attack on Niger was an attack on them.
ECOWAS is struggling to pull together a military force comprised of soldiers from member states which it has threatened to use as a last resort in a potential military operation to reinstate the deposed Nigerian president. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is the new chairman of ECOWAS. Nigeria, with by far the biggest army in the region, would be expected to take the lead in any such military operation. But President Tinubu is facing opposition from Nigerian MPs, including those in his own party, and his people, who fear the considerable risk of sparking a wider regional war.
As for Algeria, having had a history of anti-colonial struggle and particularly having fought for its own independence from France in 1962, it was quick to denounce the calls for military intervention and has refused to allow its airspace to be used for any military means. Mali and Burkina Faso, having underwent coups in 2021 and 2022 respectively, immediately expressed their support for the new government in Niger, making it clear they would not join any invasion and instead began sending military support to the coup government in order to bolster their defense. I would like to remind you that for more than 10 years, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have been confronting the negative consequences, socioeconomic consequences, security consequences, political consequences, humanitarian consequences of the risky NATO adventure in Libya. Of course, the question arises if it took us 10 years. Accepting another adventure of the same nature in Niger would take us how many years? We don't know, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? One thing is certain, President Goita and President Traoré have clearly said no, no, and no. We will not accept military intervention in Niger. Our survival depends on it. And of course, the heads of state of Mali and Burkina Faso have taken firm decisions to leave assets, not liabilities, for the future generations. To ECOWAS, we have two messages. The first message is that we very clearly demand the end of the starvation of our people. We do not need sanctions. I think our people are going through an enormous amount of suffering. The second message is also an important message. We appreciate ultimatums, but I think ECOWAS is badly mistaken of the recipient. These ultimatums must be addressed to the terrorist groups. Next, we'll be checking in on where the situation stands now, but first I'd like to play you a clip with journalists Eugene Perrier and Rania Khalek discussing the recent events in West Africa. They're part of a great group over at Breakthrough News who regularly cover world events in great detail. I'll only show a brief clip so you can understand the new policies of some of the recent coup governments in West Africa, and hopefully you'll head over to Breakthrough News for the rest.
I think for obvious reasons, Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, because of his comments at the Russia-Africa Summit, comments that he's made, in front of youth in Burkina Faso, I think many people are looking to Burkina as maybe the leading edge of these military transitions, these civil military projects. And so, for instance, they have set the goal for themselves, ambitious goal, we'll see if they meet it, of creating 1 million jobs in the next couple years, giving 100,000 solar-powered water pumps to rural areas so that they can have clean water. They're saying that by 2025, they're going to spend $250 million on maternal health care, that they're going to electrify 605 localities, and that they're going to spend about 150-ish, 144, but close to $150 million on fertilizer, agricultural machinery, and seeds for farmers. Obviously, most of the people there live in rural areas and do work in agriculture. They grow a lot of tomatoes in Burkina Faso, but they don't make ketchup. So they're developing 3 new tomato processing plants to try to move up the value chain there. They've picked 3 artisanal mining sites that they're now trying to mechanize.
Following the passing of the deadline to reinstate President Bazoum and a number of ECOWAS meetings on the potential military intervention in Niger, on August 14th, the coup government announced they would be prosecuting Bazoum for high treason.
In an announcement hours after the junta said it was open to talk with ECOWAS, Niger's mutinous soldiers said they will prosecute deposed President Mohamed Bazoum for high treason and undermining state security.
In any case, the Nigerian government has so far gathered necessary evidence to prosecute the deposed president and his local and foreign accomplices before the competent national and international bodies for high treason and undermining Niger's internal and external security following his exchange with nationals, foreign head of state, and heads of international organizations.
On the 15th of August, Mali's leader Assimi Goita, who himself came to power in a coup in May of 2021, reported having a phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, wherein President Putin, quote, stressed the importance of a peaceful resolution of the situation for a more stable Sahel. Meanwhile, jihadist attacks in the region did not slow down, with officials confirming that a skirmish took place near the border with Mali. The ambush took place about 60 kilometers from the capital Niamey, resulting in at least 17 Nigerian soldiers killed and 20 wounded, with the army also stating that more than 100 jihadist fighters were neutralized during their retreat. On that same day, ECOWAS and the African Union publicly spoke about their positions on the situation in Niger. While ECOWAS is still fixated on a military response, the African Union's Peace and Security Council met in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, rejecting an ECOWAS proposal to stage a military intervention, with a diplomat who attended the meeting saying many southern and northern African member countries were fiercely against any military intervention. With the African Union rejecting the planned intervention, ECOWAS instead went ahead and met that week in Ghana, publicly stating that they had agreed upon a day for the invasion.
All member states of ECOWAS present here today have all committed elements. They have committed their own equipment. They have committed their own resources to undertake this mission. So I tell you, we are ready to go anytime the order is given. The D-Day is also decided.
On August 22nd, the African Union had announced that it would suspend Niger effective immediately and would evaluate the repercussions of the proposed military response by ECOWAS. This followed a decision by a number of African nations to cut their aid to Niger. On August 25th, Nigerian authorities demanded the French ambassador leave the country within 48 hours. French authorities said Niger's military government had no authority to make such demands, saying the approval came solely from the legitimate elected Nigerian authorities.
The coup leaders have defied growing international pressure to release him and return the country to civilian rule. The junta is rallying supporters to what they describe as a million-man march in the capital. Now, it comes a day after hundreds of people had a protest outside the French army base there, and they want French forces to leave in 1 week. Relations with the former colonial power France are getting worse by the day. The military rulers have ordered the ambassador to leave by Sunday after he refused to meet with the foreign minister.
International diplomats such as the ambassador are protected under the Vienna Convention, but their ambassadorship can be revoked by the host government as long as their safety is ensured and they are allowed to return home. However, the complication stems from the fact that France in this instance denies the legitimacy of the host country. On August 31st, Niger's military government ordered the police to expel the French ambassador, revoking the visas for him and his family. On September 1st, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu asked that the junta consider a 9-month transitional period back to civilian rule, countering their initial proposal of a 3-year transition period.
The visit is seen as a potential breakthrough, as the junta has agreed to dialogue and announce a 3-year transition to democracy.
On the 4th of September, Nigerian authorities reopened the country's airspace to commercial flights after a month of closure. Although, since August 2nd, Niger reopened land and air borders to only 5 neighboring countries: Algeria, Burkina Faso, Libya, Mali, and Chad. The following day, French authorities appeared to be in talks to greatly draw down French military presence in the nation, although no firm commitments were made. Nigerian officials took to national television, claiming France was instead moving more assets into neighboring ECOWAS nations in what they feared to be preparation for a military intervention. As it stands, ECOWAS and the African Union have maintained their sanctions, Niger is suspended from the African Union, and ECOWAS has activated its standby force to prepare for an intervention. The world awaits with bated breath, uncertain if war is imminent. The United Nations warns of looming starvation and worsening levels of poverty, partly due to the harmful sanctions imposed by regional authorities. There seems to be a growing momentum on the continent towards severing ties with colonial powers, as the number of coups steadily increases.
Any president that tries to back the system and do something about taking control of the financial resources, and I'm talking about African countries depositing their bank reserves with France, I'm talking about African countries giving up their natural resources, no value addition, France having first right of refusal for all the natural resources discovered yet to be discovered. France companies having first right of refusal for all contracts, large, small, private, public. France having military presence in those countries, and France having the ability to invade them in the event that they feel their interests are being violated. France making sure that those countries can only be trained by France, the military can only be trained by France, the military equipment can only be bought from France. Come on now, our people didn't understand all this. So we can change African heads of states in those former French colonies like we change clothes. If those fundamentals are not addressed, nothing is going to change. The Africans now understand where the real problem is. The real problem, like I've always said, the biggest risk to peace and security in Africa is France. Let's make no mistake about that.
Thank you so much for watching our video. If you have any comments or criticisms, please feel free to reach out. If you liked it, please consider subscribing or sending to a friend. Until next time.